Hi there, it's June the 8th, and we are continuing our journey through the book of Acts, Luke's work as the sequel to his Gospel. And we're in chapter 6, and it's a short chapter. We're reading from verses 1 to 15. So in this chapter, we encounter the first real issue, the first possible division among the early church. Things seem to have been going really well. They've been living in grace. They've been sharing everything they have. They've been distributing food to the various people in need, and particularly here are mentioned widows. Now there are two groups of widows that are mentioned. There is the Aramaic-speaking or Hebraistic widows, and they're probably the natives of Palestine, of Judea, of Galilee. So they would have been native-speaking, but then there are obviously the Greek-speaking Jews. Now the Greek-speaking possibly are those who've come from out with Palestine and maybe have settled there, or even in this great growth that there's been after Pentecost, that there have been Jews from elsewhere who've come. But anyway, there are two sets here, and it seems to be that one group, that the Hebrew and Jewish believers, widows, are being favoured over the Greeks, and therefore there's a decision made that they want to administrate this, and so they call for the presentation of leaders, of people filled with the Holy Spirit who can help them to not be drawn away. And this is an important thing. The apostles are saying that their first calling, what they're there for, is to minister in prayer and in the word. They're looking for the growth of the church. They're looking to give themselves to the work of the Holy Spirit, not to get involved in the practicalities of the administration of the distribution of the food. Now what's interesting is in the selection of these men, and they're all men at this point, these men all have Greek names. So it's interesting that it seems like they were drawn from the Hellenistic part, that was the part that was making the issues. And particularly we notice Nicholas among them, and Nicholas is a proselyte. He comes from Antioch. He's not a native-born Jew. He's family, or he has become a Jew through being through conversion process. Now here we have an example of God moving in, and because they've done something practical, God can release something new, because the number, it says, of the disciples, and they're called disciples here, is interesting. The disciples is not a word reserved for the followers of Jesus, those initial 12. Now the disciples have grown, and so the disciples here grow, the number of them grows because of this practical administration. Now the other thing we see is that these ones who are chosen, these men who are chosen, are filled with the Holy Spirit, and they have hands laid on them by the apostles. They may be commended by the people and brought forward by the people, but their authorization comes from those who have received their own calling and commission from Jesus himself. And so here the one who stands out among these is Stephanos. His name means a crown, and Stephen, or Stephanos, is the one who is known for doing wonders. He may be a servant of the church. He may be waiting at tables, but he does amazing works of healing and power that also make him well known. He also teaches. He's also given to teaching, and therefore he attracts the ire and the wrath of some of the Jews from what they call the Freemen's Synagogue, Jews from mostly Hellenistic parts of the diaspora, Hellenistic places where the Jews were scattered. And these people are taking him to task because they say he is speaking against the temple and he's speaking against the law. And of course, with the new covenant comes a whole upgrading, a whole deepening, a whole broadening. No longer is the temple seen as the focus. Jesus is now seen as the focus. His resurrected body, he's brought in the new creation. The temple is not such a focus. And the law is now something which, as they took from Jeremiah 31, is no longer on tablets of stone, an external thing. It's something that's written on people's hearts. And because of that, they bring Stephen before the Sanhedrin. That's a word that comes from the Greek word synedrion, the coming together, the gathering together. And the Sanhedrin, the ruling council of the authorities what are about to question Stephen. Now, what's interesting, we'll see in the next chapter, in chapter 7, which is a much longer and detailed chapter, we'll see that Stephen is bringing out things which actually are then inherited by Paul and taken forward by Paul into his writings. So we might say that some of the seeds of what Paul is writing are found in the next chapter in the writings or in the speech of Stephen, which he is going to make. It's wonderful that God is concerned about the practical demonstration of his love as well as just of the preaching. And so that's why these people, Stephen, Prochorus, Nicanor, Nicholas and these others, are so important to the story, because there is a hand giving to the people, and through that it says the church is able to grow through the obedience of God, which includes the practical love. Let us show our love practically as well, in demonstrating our giving as well as our faith and our love for the presence of God in worship. Have a very good June the 8th.